Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Banished Naruto returns as the Dragon Fox Ninja and Build Ultimate Harem Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The Dragon Fox Ninja. Resting underneath the cherry blossom tree was a young man, who appeared to be in his early 20s. He had blonde spiky hair, with two bangs framing his face with the tips colored red, deep blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on both sides of his face. If someone saw him standing, they would see that he was 6 feet tall. This was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, former shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato, son of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki of Uzushiogakure, and the third Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, or Kurama was the fox's name. His attire was that of a traditional shinobi shozoku colored red, with black tabi boots, and his black hood off his head like a hoodie sweatshirt, and also his red-colored half-face mask lowered to his chin. Over this, were a samurai armor chest plate, with 2 shoulder pieces on his shoulders that were also colored black, with red spirals on the center of the shoulder pieces, and chest plate. He also had black forearm, and shin armor with red stripes. His new hitai with black cloth, with the kanji for hidden, written on the plate was currently around his neck. Next to him, lay a sword. An o-katana to be exact, stored in its black lacquered sheath, with indigo blue cord rope tied on it. The guard of the katana was a dragon in a circle, and was made of silver. The handle was wrapped in the same blue colored rope as the rope around the sword sheath, with black diamond shapes, while the pommel was also silver. Also on his person were kunai in holsters on his legs, and a shuriken pouch, attached to his belt, on his left side. Naruto sighed in relaxation as he enjoyed the spring day. "I love getting used to this," he said with a small smile. It was over 4 years since the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War, and 3 years since he was banished, because the whole village where he was born couldn't let go of their blind hate for him. After the death of Tobi, the true leader of the Akatsuki, the end of the Edo Tensei army and the disappearance of Kabuto, and surprisingly, the revival of most of the undead shinobi, the son of the Yondaime Hokage went up against his supposed best friend, and traitor of the leaf, Sasuke Uchiha. It was a hard fight, but in the end, Naruto won. He then brought back the last Uchiha back to Konoha, keeping his promise to Sakura. But, unfortunately, the Haruno gave the poor Jinchuriki a brutal beating for injuring her, Sasuke-kun. Naruto didn't fight back, because he was more honorable than that. Afterward, Naruto decided not to go anywhere near them. It was then later that the young Uzumaki saw everyone in the village giving him the same glares, and whispering the same insults when he was a child. It became clear to him that the acceptance he received from the villagers, after he defeated Pain, was nothing but a lie. To make it worse, many of his so-called friends and surrogate family abandoned him. First was Iruka Sensei, the first person to acknowledge him, who said that passing him was a mistake, and that he should have let Mizuki finish him off when he was 12. That statement from the man who he once thought of as an older brother hurt him than when Jiraiya died, who was revived thanks to the jutsu Nagato used. Next were the rest of the Konoha 11, with the exception of Hinata, who all spat hateful words towards him, and then left him in the street, shocked and hurt. Then, the Konohamaru Corps simply just ignored him, with the said Sarutobi saying he will never call the monster who killed his grandmother a brother, and took off, with Moegi and Udon following. The senseis of the Konoha 11, including Team 10's Asuma, just told him to get lost and not bother them. He even noticed his surrogate mother, Tsunade Senju, and his godfather, Jiraiya giving him the cold shoulder, and giving him the look that said, "Beat it or else," but in a more spiteful way. The only ones in Konoha that were on his side were the Tokubetsu Jonin Anko Mitarashi, the Chunin Izumo and Katetsu, his surrogate older sister, and Anbu Captain Yugo Azuki, the Ichirakus, and finally, Hinata Hyuga. The two began to go out together after Sakura's unwarranted punishment on the young Uzumaki. However, it apparently wasn't to be, because the elders of Hinata's family demanded for her to be wed to a nobleman, or be put into the branch family. So they forced her to stop seeing him. It wasn't much longer until the councils of Konoha, in all of their infinite wisdom, 117 Jorn, rolls eyes ya right, decided to sentence him to be banished from Konoha, with Tsunade agreeing wholeheartedly. When he left the village, he took his old headband, and just tossed it away like garbage. Before he left, the councils demanded Jiraiya to strike Naruto's name from the Toad contract. They didn't waste even a second, and crossed his name off from the list of summoners. The people who still saw him as a friend and loved one bid him goodbye, except for Hinata, who was forbidden to see him by her father, Hiyashi, and her cousin, Neji. Luckily, Yugo told the young Jinchuriki why the Hyuga heiress couldn't come, and Naruto said he understood, and then left. Knowing that the councils would pull a fast one, Naruto decided to head west, away from the elemental nations. He heard the western lands were in the state of constant warfare, but knew he was safer there than in the elementals. He could have gone to countries he helped in the past, but decided not so he wouldn't bring trouble to them. While in the west, he came across several individuals who he fought, however none of them were a real challenge, being mid-chunin ranked at most. To say Naruto was getting bored would be an understatement. It was then, when he arrived in a forest, that his life changed. While walking through the forest, he caught sight of a figure, running through the trees holding onto something. Curious, he gave chase, and immediately saw it was a man dressed in a dark green shinobi shozoku uniform, with gray spider web designs. He was armed with an okatana, and a regular katana on his back, and also a compound bow. He saw what the shinobi was carrying and was shocked to see a frightened little girl, with a pink hair band in her black hair, and wearing a light purple kimono. Acting fast, he used a kunai to get the ninja's attention, and after telling the man to let the girl go, a fight erupted. He immediately noticed that the man was at least mid-jonin level, and was well skilled with the two katana he had. Using a combination of shadow clones, taijutsu, and the few Fudan and Fuin jutsus he knew, he gave the ninja had a hard fight, in which the latter said that his name was Izaya, of the Black Spider Ninja clan. However, Naruto would have to admit Izaya was a good fighter, and he wasn't too sure if he could win. However, Naruto managed to turn the tables in the fight when he managed to grab Izaya's okatana, and he managed to use it to kill him, and save the girl. However though, the spider ninja used a poison that was on the katana, and Kurama was having trouble healing his injuries because of it. To make it worse, he was bleeding profusely. Just before he lost consciousness from losing all the blood, he saw a group of ninja arrive, wearing different color shozoku, from green to ash gray, wearing a hitai with the kanji for hidden inscribed on the metal plate. Soon after he saw them, he passed out. When he woke up, he saw he was in what looked a room in the Hyuga or Uchiha compound back in Konoha. It was then he met Joe Hayabusa, and Shiden Mugen Tenshin. He asked if the girl was alright, which they answered, she was. They then explained that he was in the Kakar hidden ninja village, and the person that Naruto had saved was a girl named Sakura, much to Naruto's surprise. They then asked him who he was, and where he came from, and Naruto, seeing no reason why not to trust them, told them. He first told them his name, where he was from, and how he was banished from Konoha after the recent war, just for being a Jinchuriki. That caught the two leaders by surprise, and they asked to explain. He nodded, and told the story about how he was born on the same day as the Kyuubi attack, and how his father, the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, sealed it into him, after the Biju was released from his mother, the previous Jinchuriki of the Fox, by Tobi. Then, he told them, how his father wished for the people of Konoha to see him as a hero. Unfortunately, they spat on his parents' sacrifice to save him and the village and instead treated him as the Kyuubi reborn. He described in every detail of how he was insulted, glared at, treated like trash, beaten by mobs, parents moving their children away from him, and store owners raising their prices so he couldn't buy any food or decent clothing. Then, he told them about his days in the ninja academy, and the teacher's acts of sabotage to his education as a shinobi. After that, he then told them of his first real mission in Nami no Kuni, the Chunin exams, the Konoha invasion by Suna and Oto, finding Tsunade, the mission to rescue Sasuke from the Sound Nin, and his 3-year training trip with Jiraiya. Then he told him about his return to Konoha, and the mission to rescue Gaara from the Akatsuki. He continued on to the second Konoha invasion, this time led by the rogue guardian shinobi, Kazuma, the father of his friend from the Fire Temple, Sora. Then he spoke how he met Shizuka of the Nadeshiko village. He described how the village was a matriarchal society, and how the kunoichis there took their training seriously, unlike the fangirls from the other villages. The old leaders were impressed by the description of these female ninja. He then talked about Nagato, and his position as the figurehead leader of Akatsuki, under the alias Pain, who possessed the legendary Sharingan. He then described of how he invaded Konoha along his 6 paths of pain, and his childhood friend and partner Conan, and how he managed to convince him to stop his attack. He even told how he met his father for the first time, thanks to Minato sealing his chakra within so he could fix the seal if he reached the 8th tail, after he snapped after seeing Hinata fall to pain. The two men swore they saw little traces of tears and concluded that the meeting between father and son was indeed emotional. Then he came to the Cage Summit, and the beginning of the 4th Shinobi War, and when he was sent with fellow Jinchuriki Killer Bee in order to master his chakra. He smiled as he told how he met his mother, Kushina of the Uzumaki clan, which piqued Joe's curiosity. He went on to tell his experiences through the war, all the way up to his final battle with the phony Madara Uchiha, known as Tobi, and how he managed to defeat him, and bring the war to an end. However, then he came to how the village began to treat him after the war, how most of his so-called friends began to turn their backs on him, and how only a select few remained loyal to him. He then told them of his banishment, and he finished telling his tale after telling them of his fight with Izaya. To say the two ninja masters were shocked and disgusted at Konoha's actions would be an understatement. They were absolutely ticked. They were also concerned for the blonde's safety, because Izaya was a rising star ninja in the Black Spider clan, and the evil ninja could come after him in revenge. Silently agreeing with each other, Joe and Shiden asked Naruto if he would be a shinobi of Kakur. To say the son of the Yondaime was floored, was an understatement, and he asked why. The two explained that what he told them, while would have destroyed a regular shinobi, he pulled through. He has shown his skills as a shinobi time and time again, and they said that they and the rest of the village would be honored to have him among them. Plus, they told him the Black Spider clan will now be after him, since he killed one of their best jonin. Naruto thought about it, but wished to have some time to think about the decision. Joe and Shiden said they didn't mind and gave him as much time as he wanted, and left him to his thoughts. The young blonde container then went into his mindscape and talked with Kurama and asked for the Biju's opinion on what to do, in which the fox replied he didn't know, but told him it couldn't hurt to accept. He even suggested that these Kakur nin could train him to become stronger. Naruto weighed the pros and cons of the situation, and after much thinking decided to join them. When he woke up from his meditation, he was surprised to find 2 people in the room he was in. One was a man dressed in a leather black ninja outfit, his head and face concealed by the hood and face mask he was wearing, and had a red-handled katana on his back. Then there was a girl his age, which Naruto had to admit was one of the most beautiful women he'd ever seen, wearing a modified Miko outfit, with red kunoichi hakama pants and high-heeled tabi, her black hair in a high ponytail, with a bang parted to the left side of her face, and yellow eyes. She had what looked like an ornated naginata on her back. The two introduced themselves as Ryu Hayabusa, Joe's son and heir to the clan, and Momiji, a dragon shrine maiden, and Ryu's student in the ninja arts. Naruto greets them, and asks them what they wanted. Ryu told him that they had been told what Naruto had told his father, and they both agreed that should Naruto accept their offer to stay in their village, that Ryu and Momiji will help train Naruto in their own ninja ways. Ryu would teach him in ninpo, proper kenjutsu, archery, and ninjutsu, while Momiji will help with his education since she was told of how he was sabotaged in the academy. Naruto told them he had been meditating on the offer, and said he accepted. Thus began Naruto's new life in Kakkar. The training he went through with Ryu was what the blonde could call hell. This training was on par with the Toad's, if not more brutal. He was forced to lift huge boulders on his shoulders, dodge arrows, kunai, and shuriken, learn stealth without being noticed, and in the spars with Ryu, the ultimate ninja showed no mercy. Momiji taught the former Konoha nin about the history of the village, as well as the Hayabusa and Mugen Tenshin clans. He was surprised to learn that the Hayabusa were descended from the dragon ninja, who in turn, were descended from real dragons. The Mugen Tenshin were said to be descended from the creatures known as Tengus. He learned that the two clans were once native to Oni no Kuni, but apparently, a corrupt and greedy daimyo wanted their power for himself. As a result, the two clans were forced to leave their ancestral home or face annihilation. They traveled across the elemental nations until they finally came to the western lands, and founded Kakkar. For a few months, Naruto trained under Ryu and learned under Momiji. He even met Ayane, the pariah of the Mugen Tenshin. Seeing as how she was treated by most of her clan, Naruto managed to break her out of her jealousy for her half-sister, and her cold persona. He even managed to mediate peace between her and her half-sister Kasumi, who was Ryu's girlfriend and lover. To say Kasumi was like a sister to him, as her caring nature and gentleness were a far cry from the normal ninja life. However, one day, their village was attacked by the Black Spider Ninja clan. Naruto and the other ninja of Kakkar fought in the defense of the attack, but after an explosion's shockwave hit Naruto, he then found a strange sword lying in front of him. The oddest thing was that the sword was giving off its own strange aura. Without much of a choice, Naruto took the strange blade, and uses it to continue defending the village from the attackers. As soon as the spider nin retreated and everything calmed down, the Kakkar nin saw Naruto holding the O-katana and were immediately fearful, but were then stunned as Naruto didn't show an ounce of being corrupted by the sword. Naruto was confused by the other Kakkar ninjas' shocked faces and asked what was wrong with them. After being asked by Joe and Shiden where he got the sword, and if he felt strange, Naruto told him what happened, and how he used the sword to fight off the spider nin, and that he felt alright. To say, the others were shocked was an understatement. Joe then explained to Naruto that the sword he was wielding was the Dark Dragon Sword, the sister blade to the Dragon Sword. He said that the power of the Dark Dragon Blade grows with each killing that occurs within its vicinity. When a person breaks the seal of the Dark Dragon Blade, he said, it would gather the hatred and evil of mankind and confer it on the one who wields it, transforming him into the devil incarnate. Yet for some reason, Naruto had not been corrupted. Naruto was stunned by the story, and mentally asked Kurama, which the fox replied that the spirit inhabiting the sword was trying to corrupt him, but thankfully he stepped in and stopped it. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief at that. 6 months after the Black Spider clan invasion, Naruto was told by Joe he was ready to take the Dragon Ninja Trials. The trials were a series of tests that are grouped in 5 levels: Acolyte, Mentor, Leader, Master, and Ultimate, although very few people took the trials, and for good reason. It was held in a cave where the dragon god resided, after the 2 clans were exiled from Oni no Kuni. The dragon god warned the former Neo-Toad Sannin that the possibility of being killed was extremely high. But Naruto just gave him a determined look, and replied, I don't care if I die. If I die, I'll die knowing I had the guts to do it. He managed to pass the first 3 with little difficulty, but then it got harder to where he was almost killed on one of the master trials. But through it all, he pulled through. But he faced one of his greatest challenges during the ultimate trial, where he had to face 2 demons of the past, Yami Naruto, and Tobi. He fought his two old enemies for what felt like days. However, in the end, Naruto managed to defeat them both, and passed the last dragon ninja trial. Then, as a shock, the souls of his parents appeared before him. After a tearful embrace, his told him that they know what happened to him after the war ended, and to say they were very disappointed in Konoha was a vast understatement. They told him that no matter what village he was a part of, they would always be proud of him, and then left. Naruto immediately collapsed from his injuries afterwards. He had to spend almost 2 weeks in the village medical center due to his injuries, even with Kurama's chakra healing him. The occasional visitors he got during his time recovering were Momiji and Ayane, who he noticed have shown signs that a certain Hyuga from his village had shown toward him. Also people who visited him were the village orphans, Sanji, Sakura, the girl he saved, Hamamaru, and Denroku, who looked up to him as an older brother, along with Ryu, in the months Kakur became his adopted home. After he finally recovered from his wounds, he, Ryu, Ayane, and Momiji went on a mission to destroy a Black Spider Ninja clan supply depot that were in league with a group of samurai. However, these samurai, unlike the samurai wanna-bes in the East, they actually train until their bones broke. During the mission, Naruto fought a Ronin samurai ninja who called himself Tendoka. He wore indigo with gunmetal gray trimmed robes, and his armor was colored black and silver. He also wore a mask similar to Kakashi's, only it was gray, and he had gray-blue eyes, think of the regent of the mosque's attire, only with different colors and wearing a mask like Kakashi's instead of the opera mask. Any other features Naruto couldn't see because of his hood and mask. His signature weapon was a sword that reminded Naruto of his own weapon. Only this sword was a Miao Dao, a Chinese version of the O-Katana. The handle was black, while the pommel, tang, and guard were solid brass, and the blade was a glimmering silver. What shocked Naruto was that Tendoka knew of his past life back in Konoha, and said that he too knew betrayal. The battle the two fought was intense, as the Ronin was well skilled with his sword, and his taijutsu was flawless. It only ended when Ryu and the others came to back up the blonde Jinchuriki, and Tendoka gave Naruto advice that he should seek out a new summons contract, to replace the toads who abandoned him, and then left in a shunshin of blue smoke. 2 days later, the former Konoha nin decides to take the Ronin samurai's advice. After Ryu pointed him in the right direction, Naruto began his search for a new summoning contract, specifically he is trying to find the legendary dragon summoning contract. It was rumored that the dragon contract contained all species of dragons from lands far to the west. It took Naruto a whole year to find the contract, which was in a complex under an abandoned castle on an island in the middle of a lake. There, among many of the treasures left behind by the original owners, and remains of dead samurai, on a pedestal resembling a four-legged winged dragon, sat the scroll which was colored a brownish green, and was the same size as the toad summoning contract, laid his objective. He smiled remembering how he met Draco. Flashback no jutsu. Before he could even touch the scroll, a thick accented voice stopped him in his tracks. You know, you are not the first to try and get the dragon contract, do you? He twirled around, and came face to face with a massive dragon the size of Gambunta, possibly even bigger. It looked like a classical Western-style dragon, with reddish-colored scales and yellow draconic eyes, with several horns on his head, 117 Jorn. For a lack of a better description, just think of Draco from Dragonheart, only way bigger of course. Yeah, Naruto said, very intimidated by the large, very large, reptilian monster before him, so I heard. The dragon gave a deep chuckle at that as he looked at the blonde who was wearing his Kakur nin attire, a ninja. And from Kakur as well, he then paused as he sniffed the air, I know this scent. You wouldn't happen to be a Jinchuriki now, would you? Naruto's eyes narrowed a bit. You've got something against Jinchurikis? He asked. If so, then maybe this isn't the right contract for me. The dragon just snorted. No, I hold nothing against Jinchuriki. he said, only fools confuse the demon with its container, and if I recognize that scent from anywhere, I believe you must be the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, correct? Naruto was taken aback by this. You know Kurama? He asked. Not personally, but I knew one of his containers. Mito Uzumaki. He smiled at the memory of the wife of the Shadaime, while Naruto was shocked. She was a headstrong woman, that Mito, she was my favorite summoner back then. He then looked at Naruto again. So, what's your name, kid? Naruto. He answered, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. The dragon looked a bit surprised. Well now, this is a surprise. He said, a dependent from the Uzumaki clan. I thought the last Uzumaki died out when Uzushio was destroyed. Were all Uzumaki's dragon summoners? Naruto asked, and the dragon nodded. Yes, almost all of our summoners in the past were of the Uzumaki clan. He said, when we thought the clan was wiped out in the Shinobi War, I took the contract here, waiting for someone worthy enough to be our summoner. As you can see, we haven't had much luck. Naruto chuckled a bit. Obviously, he said, anyways, what is your name, Dragon-sama? The dragon just grinned a bit. You can call me Draco, he said. Flashback no Jutsu, Kai. It was then, after passing Draco's tests for loyalty, determination, and strength, that Naruto was made the next dragon summoner. He then began to tell Draco about his life in Konoha before he became a ninja of Kakur. How he was neglected and abused during his childhood. The teacher's attempts to sabotage his education at the academy, how he became a genin, his first C rank turned B rank mission, how he met Haku, the Chunin exams, the Oto Suna invasion, his 3-year training trip with Jiraiya, his return to the village, and the mission to rescue Gaara, the invasion of the grave robbers, how he met Shizuka of the Nadeshiko village, his training with the Toads, Pain's invasion along with Hinata's confession of love for him as she protected him. He then went into detail about the Fourth Great Shinobi War, how he met his parents, his victory over Tobi, and his final battle with Sasuke. Next, he told him how the people of Konoha went back to despising him. How the Konoha 12, with the exception of Hinata, abandoned him. How his own godparents falsely accused him of his parents' deaths, and how Jiraiya and the Toads removed him from the contract. And finally, his banishment, and how Tsunade never hesitated to do so, and the few people who cared about him saw him off. To say Draco was disappointed in his old summoner's granddaughter was an understatement, and was greatly ashamed of the people of Konoha. After that, Naruto returned to Kakur, with Draco giving him a lift back to the village. The shinobi of Kakur nearly freaked out when they saw a massive dragon flying their way. However, when it landed and they saw Naruto on its back, they finally calmed down, yet they were still shocked being in the presence of Draco. For another 2 years, Draco and the other dragons trained him in the Dragon Sennin arts, and became known in the West as the Dragon Fox Ninja, for possessing the dragon contract, and being the Jinchuriki of the fox. While in the East, he was known only as the Dragon Sennin. Naruto Oni-chan. Naruto was shaken from his thoughts when he heard a voice calling him, and saw Sakura, who he called Saku-chan for short, and Sanji running toward him. Oni-chan. It's time for dinner, Sanji said. Ka-san made your favorite. Naruto smiled as he stood up. Well then, best not keep the others waiting, Sanji-kun, Saku-chan. He said as he picked the two up, and they disappeared in a shunshin. Oh 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 oh. Meanwhile, in Konoha, oh 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 oh. Tsunade Senju, the Godime Hokage of Konoha, and last of the Senju clan, sighed as she looked at the reports. Apparently, Orochimaru, who now has control of Kabuto's body, is up to his old tricks, again. He managed to convince the hardliners of Iwa, Kumo, and Mist, to rebel against their respective cages, and ally themselves with him. Onoki, the Tsuchikage, and the Raikage, were killed in the uprisings, while the Mizukage Mei, along with Onoki's granddaughter Kuretsuchi, and A's brother B, had disappeared. Orochimaru Kabuto then declared an alliance with one specific goal in mind: the eradication of Konoha. It wouldn't be bad enough that all the nations, with the exception of Suna, that were allied with them had torn up their treaties, and turned their backs on Konoha, due to Naruto being banished. After that, things went downhill for the hidden ninja village as people refused to give missions to a village that would backstab one of their own. The Fire Daimyo then came and had their funding slashed in half. Suna was still an ally, but tensions were slowly mounting between the two. She sighed sadly as she thought about the blonde-haired Jinchuriki. A week after he was banished, Tsunade then told the entire village of Naruto's condition as the Kyuubi container. This, of course, made most in the village hate Naruto even more as they viewed him as the Kyuubi. However, there were still a handful of people who still viewed Naruto as himself, namely Hinata, Yugo, the Ichirakus, Kotetsu, Azumo, and Anko. Even Shizune, her own apprentice, had support for Naruto, and ever since his banishment, her former apprentice began to distance herself away from her old teacher, shocked and disgusted that the woman she thought of as a mother would stoop to such lows. Also, there was the case where Iruka, Naruto's teacher at the academy, committed suicide at his home, a year after he was banished. His body was found by Kakashi, who also discovered the academy teacher's suicide note, showing his disgust at himself for what he did and said to Naruto, and at Konoha for believing he was a demon. Then after that, there was the time Jiraiya went to Mount Myoboku, and he along with Fukasaku met with another toad who was an expert with sealing. The toad took a look at the seal that Naruto had on him, and studied how it contained the Kyuubi, preventing it from influencing Naruto. And while studying it, he also discovered the part of the seal which once contained Minato and Kushina's chakra. They were surprised by that, and wondered why they would seal their chakra into the seal. It was Jiraiya who figured it out, and immediately hated himself for being so blind. He gave this information to Tsunade, who immediately felt shame and disgust at herself for inflicting pain, mentally, on Naruto. She told the other Konoha 11 and their senseis of this discovery, and immediately, the ones who wrongly accused Naruto, with the exception of Sasuke, were wrecked with guilt. Tsunade then made the decision to tell the village of Naruto's heritage, and how his parents sacrificed themselves to save him, and the village from the fox's wrath. It wasn't merely 2 hours, that people who mistreated began to regret what they did, more specifically, the Konohamaru Corps. The elders were furious that she revealed that information, but Tsunade told them to fuck off. A knock on the door got her attention. "Come in," she said, and the door opened and Shizune came in, though she tried to avoid eye contact with her former master. "The shinobi you asked for are here, Hokage-sama," she said in a tone that clearly said she didn't want to be in there. Tsunade could only sigh at that, but couldn't blame her. "Send them in, Shizune," the Godime said, and Shizune immediately left the room. A few moments later, the Konoha 11 Shino, Shikamaru, Kiba with Akamaru, Lee, Choji, Neji, Tenten, Ino, Sasuke, Sakura, and Hinata, and their senseis Kurenai, Kakashi, the revived Asuma, and Guy. Also arriving were Yugo, dressed in a Jonin uniform rather than her Anbu outfit, Anko, Kotetsu, and Azumo. "You asked for a Tsunade-sama?" Kurenai asked. "Yes," Tsunade said as she folded her arms and leaned against the front of her desk. "As you all know," she began, "next year I am retiring. In that time I need to train a ninja who will become my successor and the Rokudaime Hokage." Everyone else nodded, but she noticed Yugo was looking around the room. "Something wrong, Yugo?" she asked the former Anbu captain. A few weeks after Naruto was banished, Yugo resigned her position as Anbu captain in protest to the unfair treatment of her surrogate little brother. "Where are your friends, Koharu and Homura?" she asked with disdain for the elders. "I thought they became your best buds the moment you and the toad began despising Naruto and then banished him." Tsunade winced at that. She couldn't blame Yugo, for she knew her part in making Naruto's life after the war miserable, was unforgivable. "They're not here, because I don't want them to find out about the mission I am giving you," she said, to the surprise of the others in the room. "And what mission is that?" Yugo asked, and Tsunade sighed. "Your mission," she stated, "is to find the person I have selected to be the next Hokage, and bring him back here." "Who is it?" Sakura asked, wondering who she could possibly want to be the next Hokage. "The next Hokage," Tsunade said, "is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Joe Hayabusa was in the private dojo in the clan compound, practicing the kata for the clan's style ninjutsu. Just because his son was to become head of the clan soon, doesn't mean he shouldn't keep in shape. All the while, the ninja was thinking of another young man he saw as family. Naruto had come a long way the day he was found along with Sakura, the Ninja Gaiden 1, not the Banshee badly injured after he defeated Izaya. At first, many in the village thought he was a spy, however after he told them all of his life's tale, with no sign of lying, any thoughts like that were dropped. Joe smiled as he thought about how far the young blonde has come in just a few years. The training Ryu put him through made him into a strong individual, both mentally and physically. His determination and iron will impress Ryu, himself and others in the entire village. He absorbed all information like a sponge. And thanks to that shadow clone jutsu of his was able to learn, what would have taken decades, just a few months for him. All the while, Momiji taught the former Konoha nin, academics. He, Naruto, was at first shy around the protege of the super ninja, because of her beauty and her caring nature, but he managed to overcome that. Then, one night, when Naruto was nearing the end of his training, and weeks after the Black Spider ninja attack, Joe was visited by the Dragon God in a dream. The Dragon God explained that Naruto had dragon blood within his veins, which meant that he was a third-generation descendant of the Dragon God, and a reason why he was able to wield the Dark Dragon Sword, with the help of his tenant of course. It was then that it clicked in Joe's head about how he read from a scroll about a clan to the east that was blessed by a dragon. That clan's name was Uzumaki. The dragon told Joe of a prophecy, of one who is blessed with dragon blood, and has lived a hard life, would come from the east, and bring peace to the west. He even explained how Ryu and Kakur was part of the prophecy. Asking the great being what he must do, the dragon god advised him that Naruto must take the dragon ninja trials. And he did so, and Naruto passed with flying colors. When he had completed the trials, Naruto explained everything that had happened, from his first trial, all the way to when he defeated the Yami Naruto and Tobi, as well as his reunion with his parents. To say he astounded was an understatement, he was speechless. Then, there was his one-year quest to find the legendary dragon summoning contract scroll, after following advice given to him by the mysterious Ronin Tendoka. Naruto told him how he felt that the name the mystery warrior gave wasn't his real name, and the Hayabusa clan head agreed with him completely. And when he returned from his journey, he did so riding on the back of a colossal dragon, larger than any dragon Joe had ever seen in his life. The appearance of the dragon nearly started a panic in the village, but by the time it landed, its rider was quickly confirmed as Naruto. After being introduced to Draco by said blonde, the dragon went home to inform the other dragons of their new summoner. Since then he had been trained by the Dragon Clan in the arts of the Dragon Sage. Naruto commented that it was more brutal than the Toads, but in the end, he managed to succeed. Joe could say one thing about Naruto. Like Ryu, he made the impossible possible. The veteran ninja then heard a tapping noise and turned as he saw a messenger hawk by one of the windows of the dojo. He recognized it as the personal hawk of an allied warlord who was a friend in his younger days. Stopping his training, he walked up to the window and opened it for the hawk as it perched itself on his arm. He opened the carrying case on its back and took out a folded piece of paper. His eyes scanned the message and immediately frowned. He turned to the shadows and called out, "Mako, seaman." At that, two ninja clad in the traditional Shozoku uniform of Kakur appeared, only in different colors. One was dressed in a ice-white uniform, while the other was earth brown. The white-clad shinobi carried a kusarigama at his side, while the brown-clad one had a pair of sai that were as long as a tanto blade. "Hi, Joe-sama," they said at the same time. "Get me Naruto, Ryu, and Momiji, as soon as possible," he said to the two ninja. "Tell them it's urgent." The two ninja nodded, and as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. 10 minutes later, the three mentioned ninja appeared before Joe, Naruto in his shozoku and armor, Ryu in his black falcon suit, and Momiji in her signature outfit. All three of them geared up and ready. "What it is to San?" Ryu asked of his and said clan head handed the message to his son who began to read it, and his eyebrows raise a bit. Naruto was curious at his new surrogate brother's eye expression. "What is it, Ryu?" he asked. This is a message from General Todo," he said, surprising Momiji and making Naruto raise an eyebrow as Ryu explained. "He's a former warlord who's in charge of defending the only large port city in the western lands, Kunishinai Trans, Republic City," he said, and Naruto's eyes widen in recognition. "You mean the same samurai general who has a seat on the city council, and is also in charge of the samurai military police?" he asked and Momiji nodded. "That's right, Naruto. He's also an important ally to Kaker since Ryu saved his daughter a while back," the Kunoichi Shrine Maiden said. "He's a skilled swordsman, and also a tactical and strategic genius." "Yes," Joe said, "and he's requesting for our best shinobi to meet him at Kunishinai, and that he will explain why after you arrive. Todo is not a man who would request our best unless he believes he needs them, so I will be sending you three to see what he needs." The three mentioned shinobi nodded in affirmative at that, and then left to prepare, leaving Joe alone in the dojo. The Hayabusa sighed. He had a feeling that something will happen on the mission. And for some reason, it involved Naruto. Oh 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 oh. Meanwhile, somewhere in the western lands. Oh 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 oh. A certain white-haired pervert was busy nursing the wounds he received from a beat-down from every woman in the Konoha ninja team sent to retrieve Naruto. Why did he receive such a beating? Well, let's back up. Flashback no Jutsu AN. Special thanks to VFSNAKE for this. We have to walk through this place here to get to Kunishinai?" asked Tenten with a bit of skepticism in her voice. And rightfully so, since the sign posted above was titled, Serpent's Path, while telling just about everyone that wanted to cross to just about abandon hope. It wasn't exactly the most encouraging things to have written in front of the means to get from one end to the next in order for their mission to be complete. The Leaf Village needed Naruto back to stop Orochimaru, who had possessed Kabuto's body in the end, from launching an all-out assault on Konoha, and get their allies back to combat this new threat. "That's what the map says," answered Jiraiya while leaving out some key facts about the map he had with him. Or rather did not have with him thanks to a gust of wind removing it from his hands when no one was looking. "We have a mission to complete. I say go for it in our spring time of youth with this challenge," exclaimed Lee, with several, or rather almost everyone in the group were groaning. "Can't we just knock Lee out and throw him into the water? No one will know we killed him," whispered Shikamaru to Neji. 1. Gai-sensei would never allow it. 2. Tsunade would never believe it. And reason number 3, we actually tried that, but Gai-sensei arrived for our team meeting, so he was saved at the last moment, Neji whispered back with Shikamaru sighing. "Damn," thought Shikamaru while the group made their way through Serpent's Pass. As the group made their way through the narrow rocky path with water on both sides going far as the eye can see in what was possibly the biggest lake ever, many within the group were thinking about Naruto, and how things had gotten so far out of hand. They were all united in a common goal in defeating the Akatsuki and Tobi, using the Edo Tensei with his army of white Zetsus from conquering the elemental countries. After that mess was officially over, the only thing remaining to do was bring Uchiha Sasuke back to Konoha, and Naruto did just that despite everything he had already gone through. And how did they repay him? With neglect and hatred. Sakura had been the only one to really hurt him physically, but the fact she did it anyway no doubt had a psychological effect, and his mind was no doubt scarred from the first of many betrayals. No one had hit Naruto physically since then, but many in the group would be lying if they said the idea hadn't crossed their minds. Among them, the only ones that didn't think along those lines were Hinata, Yugao, and Anko, since they never once saw Naruto the same way the others did. Yugao was like the older protective sister of Naruto, who helped him out when needed during her days as Anbu captain, and watching over him to prevent the village from abusing their future savior. Anko knew what it was like to get screwed by the village for something that wasn't your fault and saw Naruto endure everything to prove Konoha wrong for their past abuse. She had done the same with her own past connection with Orochimaru being her teacher growing up, but sadly both could now claim neither one of them were able to convince the Leaf that they were not the monsters people said they were. As for Hinata, she knew all about Naruto's burden since they were children, and didn't care about the Kyuubi being sealed inside him. She saw Naruto putting up with the Leaf's abuse time and time again while never letting it get to him no matter what. But Hinata knew that deep down, her being forbidden to be with Naruto on the orders of the clan head Hyuga Hiashi, who was also her father, had been a major blow to his heart, and to the Hyuga heiress herself. Hinata had long since hated her father for his actions, but never stopped loving Naruto despite the policy in place to have her become the wife of some blue-blood nobleman for political gain, and she would have been married off to one too if not for, ironically, the political backlash that followed when Naruto was banished. No half-descent nobleman wanted to be married to a member of Konoha's so-called noble clans, due to that action, which would be considered by most as a means to committing political suicide, and would take years to gain even some form of influence. The only way to reverse it would be to get Naruto back to Konoha and use him to help fight the village's current state of decline. But do I want him to return? Just so he can be used again for someone else's benefit and then be thrown out once his usefulness is over? No, I won't. Naruto would never let that happen to himself again after everything the village has put him through. If it comes to choosing between Konoha and Naruto, I choose Naruto. I don't care if I am executed for treason if it comes down to it. The village doesn't deserve my loyalty any more than it does Naruto's, thought Hinata while thinking about the blonde and wondered how much he has changed since they last saw each other. For those who are too curious to know what Hinata's attire looks like, she is wearing her fourth shinobi war outfit, with a short-sleeved version of her jacket. As they walked, a tremor was felt by everyone, and instantly the group was on high alert with Byakugan eyes from each Hyuga being active with the others getting ready for a fight in their own way. What they saw was shocking, as a giant sea serpent shot out from the water's murky depths, and it looked very hungry. It was massive, as big as one of the late snake boss Manda's full-grown offspring and looked just as mean-looking too. Jiraiya-sama, do something, exclaimed Asuma while what little ground they stood on was breaking up from the roar the creature made. Just because I'm a Sannin with vast knowledge of things doesn't mean I know how to deal with this. Jiraiya shot back with Kurenai grabbing him by his coat and giving him one of her death glares that usually made Asuma cave into doing whatever she wanted with a, "Yes dear," coming out of his mouth in a squeaky voice. Do something or so help me I'll turn you into a woman with a rusty kunai, exclaimed Kurenai with Jiraiya laughing nervously before he looked up at the hungry-looking serpent towering over the group. Well, when you put it like that, I know, answered Jiraiya before picking up Anko and lifting her up over his head. Hey, put me down you dumb pervert, exclaimed Anko with Jiraiya ignoring her. O mighty sea serpent of the lake, I humbly offer you this virgin sacrifice in my hands, as well as any other you may desire here in exchange for letting the rest of our group pass by alive, and mercifully unharmed, said Jiraiya while everyone looked at him in shock. Well, most of them were shocked while Anko looked pissed off. Oh, you are so dead, called out Anko before she got out of Jiraiya's grip and began to beat him up in the Sannin crying out for mercy while everyone else in the group was now trying to remind the special Junin that there was a hungry sea serpent behind her. Now is not the time for this, Anko. Kurenai called out before the sea serpent let out a mighty roar and did not look one bit amused by what it was seeing. It didn't want to see one of them beat up another. It wanted to eat all of the up. You're as mine if we make it out of this alive. Anko called out to Jiraiya, currently running ahead of the group despite his injuries. She landed on him while the rest of the group was running and screaming for their lives. So for the next 2 hours they ran, screamed, fought, struggled to survive, and nearly died escaping the sea serpent trying to devour them whole. When they finally made it to the other side, the group was soaking wet, clothes were torn, muscles ached, and every single woman in the group was giving Jiraiya an angry look. Oh yeah, he was getting beaten up no matter what. Care to explain your actions, Jiraiya-sama? Asked Yugao, as she saw Jiraiya back up, and put his hands up while laughing nervously. Come on, you know I would never do that to you ladies. It was just to put the serpent under a false sense of security before I used my abilities that make me a Sannin and defeat it with ease, boasted Jiraiya in his usual tone he normally used to make the ladies swoon. Though if Jiraiya remembered anything from his times doing such boasting, he would recall the ladies were paid to swoon. As it stood with the women in front of him, they looked at the Sannin, then each other, and a silent conversation was being spoken among them. They turned to look at Jiraiya again, back themselves, the Sannin one more time, and then finally themselves before giving the man a cold hard look. Get him! Yelled Anko angrily before the women were on him and beating the life out of the man, currently screaming like a little girl seeing a spider for the first time. I'll say it before and I'll say it again. Women are troublesome when angry, whispered Shikamaru while the sounds of Jiraiya being beaten mercilessly by the kunoichi of their group could be heard, and winced when he saw a kick, one of many, aimed somewhere no man wanted to be hit. You don't have to say it. I'm watching it, Choji whispered back while Ino landed a solid right hook to Jiraiya's face. I feel so much better, said Anko calmly, as she felt better after beating up the Sannin for his stupid action that nearly got her eaten, and risked the mission in being one step closer to failure. What I want to know is why it's so difficult to get around to the other side using that one thin line of ground to cross. That sea serpent makes traveling difficult to the west, so how is it that trade isn't hampered when heading in this general direction? Asked Yugao, as they saw some travelers coming along a road nearby looking all happy and joyful with a spring in their step. Let's ask them, offered Asuma before waving the group over. Hello, can we help you? Said a woman, who looked like she just gave birth to a healthy baby boy about a week ago, and loving every second of having the child in her arms. Yes, we just traveled through Serpent's Pass. Can you tell us about the roads here? Asked Asuma with Jiraiya twitching nervously while sitting on a rock and hearing the conversation. Serpent's Pass? Why in Kami's name did you do that? That path has been closed for ages. In fact, it was so dangerous, it was decided by the warlord of this region who ruled here ages ago that a road be made that takes you around the lake, and basically leads you directly here without being harmed by the creature, said a man, who was the husband of the woman, and he scratched his head at the strange group. Are you serious? Why didn't you pick that up on the map? Asked Kurenai to Jiraiya, who laughed nervously again, and saw the angry look everyone around him were now giving him. This might be a bad time to tell you I kind of lost the map a few days before we got to Serpent's Pass and I didn't exactly look over that area. Sorry, answered Jiraiya with a nervous laugh before he shivered at the killer intent being thrown at him by the entire group. You should probably leave. It wouldn't be good for you or the baby to witness the death of our group member for his stupidity, replied Anko in a sweet voice with the woman just nodding along with her husband before they left in a hurry. Wait, it's not my fault. The wind took the map from me, exclaimed Jiraiya while he tried to back away from the group now surrounding him. That's actually kind of funny in an ironic kind of way, since the wind will take your ashes after we have beaten you to death and then burn your remains until there is nothing left, replied Anko in a sickly insane voice that told Jiraiya she was really going to hurt and he was really going to enjoy it. Wait, mercy, cried Jiraiya, as he was surrounded on all sides from the group, and none of them looked like they were in a mercy-giving mood. I'm sorry Jiraiya-sama, but it seems we're all out of mercy. Fortunately, we are well stocked in terms of knuckle sandwiches, and kickings ready to be dished out for you to receive, free of charge. Exclaimed Ino before the group wailed on Jiraiya again and the Sannin screamed like a little girl in the process. Again. End flashback. I've just taken 2 horrible beatings in a span of less than 5 minutes from each other. That's got to be some kind of record, thought Jiraiya while limping after the rest of the group to their destination. Hinata, meanwhile, was still thinking of any way she could possibly help Naruto, and stay with him wherever he might be. Though Dio down, she was afraid. She was afraid that Naruto might hate her as much as he may hate the rest of Konoha, and worse, he may have moved on to someone else. Just the thought of that made Hinata worry, as she stroked one of her fingerless gloves on her hands, which hid the storage seal on her palm. Just 4 months ago, a mysterious old man came to her one day, while she was on patrol duty, alone. Even though he looked harmless, the former Hyuga heiress could just tell he was anything but helpless. The old man's name was Muramasa. He claimed that he owned stores across the world, and he was attempting to set up a few stores in the elemental nations. However, when Konoha lost favor with most of the elemental nations, he moves on, but not before making personal visits to each of the few individuals in Konoha who still cared about Naruto, and gave them all swords. When he visited Hinata, he told her that she had pure heart, and that she should keep her chin up, saying that one day will come where she will be reunited with the one she loved. Those words from the old man had kept her hopes up ever since. Naruto-kun, I know your dream of becoming Hokage is nothing but a pipe dream because of the village's betrayal, she thought, but, I hope you will still love me, as I still love you. Oh 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 oh. Kuni Shinai. Oh 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 oh. The city of Kuni Shinai was a marvel of achievement in the western lands, built 70 years ago by a daimyo and a warlord who used their resources to build a place of peace for many who want to escape the constant warfare. Despite the many conflicts between warlords and other ninja clans, the city was mostly avoided, mostly due to the defenses that protect the city, and the samurai military police that also act as the army and navy, due to trade with other nations across the seas. After checking in at the main gate of the city, Ryu, Naruto, and Momiji are now walking through one of the streets to the council building where they will meet with General Todo. Naruto whistled as he looked at the skyscrapers. Man, I can't believe a city this big, let alone a port city, be still standing with the constant fighting going about, the Uzumaki said. Momiji smiled as they continued walking. It's been like this for 7 decades, Naruto-kun, she said. Of course there have been attacks in the past, but they were thwarted at the walls that protected the city, as well as the samurai who protect it. Ryu nodded his head. That's right, he said, you must give them credit, the samurai know how to make things last. The two nodded and the 2 shinobi and 1 dragon shrine maiden proceed onward. It took them an hour to find the council building, and after informing the samurai guards of the message Todo sent them, they were instructed to wait in the lobby as a messenger is sent to inform the general. While waiting, Naruto got a good look at the military police for himself. Their black with silver trim armor reminded him of the same type used by the samurai of Tetsu no Kuni, only it was slightly different. Note: just imagine a mix between traditional samurai armor and the armor of the Karabros Panzer Corps. The weapons they possessed were the typical Daisho 2-sword set, a Naginata polearm, or a Yari spear, and modern Yumi bows with a quiver of arrows on their backs. He could also see a Tonto knife in their boots. Well armed for a police force, even a military police, don't you think? Naruto whispered to Ryu, who nodded. Even though Kuni Shinai is a neutral zone, the council is not taking any chances if they are attacked by any of the other factions, the super ninja said. As the saying goes, we will not join one faction, but we will not let another faction attack us, simple as that. It was then the doors to the lobby opened, and a samurai wearing custom green and red trimmed armor stepped in, turning to the shinobi, "The general may see you now," he said. "Please follow me." Nodding, the three followed the samurai out of the lobby, as they headed to where the general resided. The group of three, along with their samurai guide, arrived at the door to the general's office and the samurai turned to them. "He's waiting inside," he said, and then opened the door. "Go on in." Nodding, the three headed towards the door, opening it, and stepped inside. The general's office was rather large, but not too large. It was filled with different ancient Japanese artifacts, all in different colors from gold, bronze, and jade. Sitting at the end of the room, behind the desk, was a man who looked to be in his late 30s with short, military crew-cut brown hair with a graying brown beard. He was wearing in brown and OD-trimmed samurai military police armor without a helmet. They could also see strapped to his side was a guardless katana sword, with a rusty brown hand grip, and a dark OD scabbard. The man currently had his eyes closed. "It's good to see you again, Ryu," the man said. "I haven't seen you since you were 13 years old." The man's eyes then opened, showing they were gray. Ryu immediately bowed in greeting, with Naruto and Momiji following suit. "Sensei, it's good to see you again," the ninja said, and the man, Kiyoshiro Todo, gave a barely noticeable smile. "And you as well, Ryu," he said. "Please, take a seat, we have much to talk." Ryu nodded and he mentioned for the others to take a seat in front of the desk. Todo looked at Momiji and Naruto saw signs of recognition in the man's face. "Hello there, Momiji," he said. "I see you've grown up into a beautiful woman." Momiji blushed a bit at that. "Anyo, thank you, Todo-sama. I'm surprised you remember me since I was just a little girl at the time." "True, but you, as well your sister, both resemble your mother," he said, and Momiji nodded in agreement. The samurai turned toward Naruto, who took his cowl and mask off and blinked. "Minato?" the samurai asked, surprised. The three were surprised when the samurai general suddenly stated the name of Naruto's father, none more surprised than Naruto himself. Excuse me?" Naruto asked, a bit shocked that he would think him to be his father. "Ah, my apologies," Todo said. "You reminded me of an old friend of mine from many years ago." Naruto leaned forward a bit. "You wouldn't happen to mean Minato Namikaze, would you?" he asked, and the samurai's eyes widened a bit. "You know him?" he asked, and Naruto nodded, though somewhat sadly. "Yes, he was my father," he said, and the samurai general was shocked at that, but then chuckled. "So the dense idiot finally married that redhead from the Uzumaki clan," he said. Ryu, surprised by this, asked, "Sensei, how do you know Naruto's parents?" he said. "I met them when I was still a young Ronin, trying to find his place in the world," he said, and then looked at Naruto. "Did he make Hokage yet?" he asked, and Naruto nodded, but Todo caught the look of sadness on his face. "Yeah, he did. But it was only for a year," he said. "He died the night I was born, along with my mother." Todo's eyes widened at that, but then a somber look crossed his features. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear about that," he said, and Naruto shook his head saying it was all right. "You are your father's son. He was my friend. I'm yours," he said, and Naruto nodded. Todo then sighed. He will mourn Minato later. Right now he had a mission. "Now, let's discuss the mission," he said, and pulled a folder out and handed it to the three ninja. In it was a picture of a bald man with terrible burn scars on the right side of his face, with one of his eyes a lightish gray due to blindness, while his other eye was brown. "Kazendo Guda," Naruto said while looking at the picture and couldn't help but be reminded of Danzo. Kiyoshiro nodded in the affirmative. "Yes, he's a member on the council, and is a starched militarist," the samurai general said with a growl. Ryu looked at his old teacher, and felt sympathy for him. He knew how the former warlord hated this man's guts to no end. Naruto was curious and decided to ask. "So what did this guy do that's got you on edge?" he asked, and the general looked at the blonde. "Ever heard of a man named Gato?" he asked, and Naruto's eyes widened in alarm, as memories of the arrogant midget shipping tycoon, crime lord came back to him and he frowned in clear disgust. Yeah, I knew him. I was there when Zabuza Momochi sliced his head off in Nami when I was still a genin of Konoha, he said. What's Gouda got to do with him? After Gato's demise, the general explained, Gouda bought his shipping business. When he took control though, he removed drug dealings and slave trade from the picture. However, he still does black market weapons dealing and smuggling with several criminal organizations. The general then stood up, and turned around as he looked out the window of his office, overlooking the city below. Just recently, he continued, I've discovered he has also founded an underworld gladiator fighting ring, where some of the worst fighters compete against one another. Murderers, traitors, the list goes on to who participates in these games. He then went into detail of the games and the reactions of the three Kaker nin varied. Momiji was horrified, Naruto was gritting his teeth, and though Ryu's expression didn't show anything, his fists clenched. And you haven't done anything as of yet, why? Naruto said, and Todo sighed. I need hardcore evidence. And every undercover officer I've sent in has either disappeared, or has been found dead in a gutter. I only managed to find out about the gladiator games, until the officer who reported it ended up dead in his apartment. He then turned to them, Ryu more specifically, that's why I sent a message to your father, asking for help. I need you three to help me find enough evidence to bust Gouda. Ryu looked at the file again for a few minutes, and then looked at his old sensei. Sensei, on behalf of myself, the Hayabusa clan, and of Kaker, that I will do what I can to help, the super ninja said with Naruto and Momiji nodding in agreement. And the samurai general turned around and bowed in gratitude. Thank you, all of you. With that, the meeting was over and Todo asked one of his samurai to show them the hotel where they will staying for the duration of their mission. He then sat back down on his desk and looked at the file on his desk and glared at Gouda's picture. You've managed to slip through my fingers many times, Gouda, he growled mentally, but this time, I will bust you. That's a promise. Oh 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 oh. Meanwhile, in a hotel room. Oh 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 oh. Naruto looked around at the room that would be his home for now. The hotel room has one large bed, with a nightstand with a lamp and a clock on it. There was also a small bathroom, a kitchen, and a closet. Oddly enough, the room reminded Naruto of his old apartment back from Konoha, only a lot more cleaner, and well kept. Shaking his head to forget about his former home, he didn't realize someone sneaking up behind him, until a pair of warm arms wrapped around him from behind in a hug. Something on your mind, Naru-kun? Naruto smiled as he recognized the voice, and turned his head to see Momiji behind him. Ah, it's nothing, he said, turning around, seeing that Momiji's hair was out of its usual ponytail. Then, he embraced the dragon shrine maiden and then proceeded to kiss her. After a few minutes, the two separated for air. Did I ever told you how beautiful and cute you look? He asked, and Momiji giggled as she traced a finger on Naruto's chest. Many times, she said huskily, and Naruto then kissed her passionately again while picking her up bridal style and carrying over her to the bed. He laid her down gently and then the two began to make love to one another. Asterisk caret caret asterisk timeskip 20 minutes later asterisk caret caret asterisk. I'm afraid I can't make a lemon for you guys. Due to some circumstances on FF, I would only write the aftermath. But, if any of you are lemon writers, and like to make the scene, please let me know first. Now back to the story. Momiji gave a loud moan as she and Naruto reached their respective climax. Their bodies covered in sweat, as the young woman collapsed on her lover's chest, while Naruto held her close. Ayane's gonna freak when she realizes we did this without her, Naruto said, as Momiji rose up to look at the blonde's blue eyes. True, she said with a husky smile, but just being the two of us makes it better. She and the two kissed softly. Naruto then gave a smirk, and then rolled the two of them over, causing Momiji to squeak in surprise as she found herself on the bottom. Ready for round 2? He asked seductively, and the two continued with their lovemaking for 2 more hours. With the retrieval team, Jiraiya was leading the team again as he was healed enough, with Anko, and every female warning him that if he did anything funny like he did at Serpent's Pass, they cut his genitals off. They stopped at a town, and got a new map of the western lands, and so as to make sure they did not lose it again, the map was given to Yugo. As they were on the road, the so-called super pervert felt his pervy senses go wild, as a big perverted grin formed on his face. Someone I know just scored himself a hot babe, and is playing the mating dance, was the Sanin's thoughts. Anko saw the grin and was about to beat him up when a purple blur went past at a super fast speed, catching the Konoha ninja off guard. Whoa! Shouted Kiba shouted, what the hell was that? Before anyone could answer, there was a distant shout of a female saying, those bakas forgot about me. Coming from the direction the blur went through. What the hell? Yugo said as she, and the other just blinked in surprise and confusion. Hey! Shouted a male voice from behind them, and they turned around and saw 2 people, a man, who stood at a height of 5 feet 11, ginger hair, and brown eyes, who was wearing a red shinobi shozoku uniform with brown samurai shoulder armor pieces, and also shin and forearm armor ADN black tabi boots. He was wearing a black ninja mask and a black headband. The group could make out 2 katana on his back, one strapped horizontally, and the other was strapped with the handle peeking over his right shoulder. The second person was what caught the eye of every male in the retrieval team. It was a girl with ginger red colored hair in a high ponytail as the man, and was 5 feet 2. It was what she was wearing, a blue kunoichi dress with a white sash with white stockings that went to her mid-thighs and kunoichi sandals with blue shin armor. She also had a wakizashi that was strapped to her back. Jiraiya was immediately thinking of adding this girl to this series, but couldn't do anything with the women near. You wouldn't happen to see a purple blur come by here? The man asked. Kurenai was the first to answer. Yes, she said and then pointed in the direction the blur went, it went that way. The man nodded in thanks, but then his eyes squinted when he saw the group's headbands. You're all Konoha shinobi, he said, and the group was surprised when the two became tense. Jiraiya had one thought to all this. Why do I feel like we're about to get our collected kicked? The atmosphere was tense as the Konoha team and the 2 Hakur ninja stared at each other. It was a few minutes before the silence was broken. Come on Imouto, we better catch up to Ayane, Hayate said, and Kasumi nodded as they were about to take off only for Kurenai to stop them. Wait, maybe you can help us, she said and the 2 siblings looked at the Genjutsu mistress. What is it? Kasumi asked, though with a voice that had a cautious and suspicious tone. We're looking for someone, a former ninja from our village, said Asuma as he lit a cigarette in his mouth. He's about the same height as Kiba here, he motioned to said dog user, has blonde spiky hair, blue eyes, and 6 whisker-shaped birthmarks on his face. The 2 ninja of the Tenshin Mugen immediately tensed at that, knowing the description. I'm afraid we haven't seen him, Hayate lied, although too hurriedly, as he motioned for Kasumi to prepare for a fight. Jiraiya's eyes squinted at how quickly the young man gave his answer. Are you sure about that? The Toad Sage said, your body language says otherwise. Hayate mentally cursed himself at that, though his face remained calm. Kasumi however was glaring at the Sanin. Even if we did know where Naruto Ni is, she said with an edge to her tone, we wouldn't tell you. The others perked at that when Kasumi said the blonde's name. But then were surprised by how the kunoichi mentioned him. So you do know him, Shikamaru said, and the 2 Mugen Tenshin ninja nodded. Yes, Hayate said, but I would think before I go too far, if I were you. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Kiba shouted, before receiving a glare from Kurenai to stand down. For Hinata, her heart skipped a beat, realizing they were close to finding Naruto. But she knew it had been 3 years since she last saw the person she loved so much. What he meant to say is that the Naruto you know isn't the Naruto you all remember from the time when he was still a ninja from your village, Kasumi said. Naruto ni is stronger, smarter, and more mature than the loudmouthed, knuckle-headed, Kyuubi brat you abandoned. The others winced at that accusation knowing it was true. Look, we know what we did to him was wrong and stupid now. Kiba said. That's why we're trying to find him, to apologize to him, and bring him back. Hayate's eyes narrowed at that. Or maybe you need him because of the Kyuubi, he said, making a few of the Konoha 11 scowl at that. That's not true, said Ino. We need him to come back so he can take the position of Hokage. Jiraiya slapped his forehead at Ino's slip, while Kasumi and Hayate blinked. Hokage, Hayate said with a skeptical tone, I thought a banished ninja from either of the elemental nations could never become a Kage. It was at this moment Kakashi spoke up. Yes, but Lady Tsunade had cleared all charges against Naruto, and the village wants him back. We only banished him because we were beginning to believe that the seal the Kyuubi was inside of was beginning to fail and the demon was taking over Naruto's body. It wasn't until after Jiraiya-sama took a further look into the seal that he discovered Naruto's parents had actually placed fail-safes in the seal to prevent that from happening. You'll have to come another time, Kasumi said. He's on a mission right now, and the less distractions the better. The two prepared to leave before a soft voice stopped the siblings. Wait, please. They turned as Hinata stepped out from the group. Can you at least please tell us how he is? Kasumi looked at the girl, taking in her features before recognizing her. You're Hinata Hyuga, right? She asked, surprising the others. Naruto-kun talked about you a lot. He actually talked to us about all of you, Hayate said. He said nice things about you, at least up until he talks about his banishment. Several of the others flinched at that. Kasumi sighed a bit. I can't tell you too much, she said. However, I will tell you he is a lot stronger and smarter than he was when you last saw him. She then looked around and sighed again. Look, it's completely up to him if he wants to come back to your village or not, or if he wants to even see any of you. If you stay here, we'll tell you if he wants to see any of you once his mission is over. She then shifted her focus more on Hinata. He has also found two others who love him for him. Hinata-san, she said, and noticed the Hyuga's face become crestfallen at that. But, he said, that if he sees you again, Hinata, he'll properly return the feelings you have for him. Hinata's eyes widened at this, before some traces of tears started to form in her eyes before she wiped them away, a small smile on her face. Thank you, she said, and Kasumi nodded with a smile of her own. However, Sasuke was becoming more and more jealous of Naruto by the moment. He wasn't jealous of the Dobi having 3 women that love him unconditionally, he was pissed about what the girl said about him getting stronger and smarter. The Dobi, getting stronger and smarter. If anyone deserves to have power, it's me. Not him, were his dark thoughts as he cursed the blonde with all his might. If you excuse us, we really need to get going, Hayate said, and he and his sister prepared to leave. Only for the Uchiha to do something stupid. You're not going anywhere, said Sasuke as he activated his Sharingan and prepared to charge using his Chidori. The other Konoha ninja were shocked and horrified. Sasuke, don't, Kakashi yelled out, just as the spoiled Uchiha attempted to ram the assassination jutsu into Kasumi. Only for a flash of blue light to appear and Sasuke being kicked back by Hayate, the latter who had an angry scowl on his face. Don't ever touch my sister, he growled at the downed form of the Uchiha. Kakashi and Jiraiya were shocked at Hayate's speed. It reminded them of their teacher, student's Hiraishin. So fast, they thought at the same time, as Sasuke got back and prepared to charge again, only to feel stiff. Not so fast, Uchiha, Shikamaru said as he used his shadow possession jutsu to restrain Sasuke, who was giving the Nara a glare. Damn you Nara, let me go. The emo king yelled as he struggled to get free, only for a shadow to start wrapping around him and closing in on his neck. If you don't cut it out, I will break your neck with my shadow. Troublesome consequences and elders be damned. Shikamaru growled out, his face showing he meant it. Shikamaru, let him go, Jiraiya ordered while giving Sasuke a heated glare as said shadow user released his jutsu, albeit reluctantly. As for you Uchiha, if you ever pull a stunt like that again, I'll break every bone in your body, seal your chakra and send you back to Konoha tied up in a sack, you got me. Sasuke could only give a disgruntled, TFT. Before getting back in line. He turned back to apologize to Hayate, but to his and the other members of the team's shock, they saw he and Kasumi were nowhere to be seen. Well shit, thanks a lot Emo King. They're gone, Kiba yelled, clearly pissed at Sasuke. Now how in the hell are we gonna find Naruto? Jiraiya sighed in irritation, as their lead to finding Naruto quicker was gone in a flash. We stick to the original plan, the Sannin said, we head to Kuni Shinai, find a place to set up shop and search for Naruto. If you see him, don't approach him, just report back to Viacom. Everyone, except Sasuke, nodded as they continued their trek to the city. All the while Jiraiya was looking at the spoiled Uchiha and gave a nod to Kakashi who returned it, knowing what the Sannin was thinking about. However, what the Konoha shinobi didn't know, was that in the shadow of a tree, a figure was watching them leave in the direction of the largest port city in the west, with piercing royal blue eyes. My, so Konoha has come to reclaim their weapon, the figure said, with disgust on the words, reclaim, and weapon, but they'll be in quite the shock when they meet up with him. The figure then chuckled as they disappeared into the shadow. Meanwhile in Kuni Shinai, hotel room, cerulean eyes opened as Naruto awoke from his sleep after the activities he and Momiji did last night. Turning his head, he smiled as he saw the young woman snuggled up on his chest asleep, with a content smile on her face, as her long black hair was out of its signature ponytail and spread out over them like a blanket. Reaching his hand up, he cupped the dragon shrine maiden's face affectionately, causing her to move into the touch. Naru-kun, she cooed out, causing the former Konoha shinobi to chuckle. Wakey, sleepy head, Naruto, prompting the young woman's yellow eyes to flutter open, and a warm smile to etch itself on her face. Morning, Koi, Momiji said, before she gave Naruto a soft but passionate kiss. What time is it? Just past 9 a.m., the former Konoha nin said. We should get ready and meet up with Ryu. Momiji nodded and the two got out of their bed and got dressed and headed out in the hallway where Ryu was waiting for them, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Though they could see the look in his eyes that he looked mildly irritated, no doubt he heard their activities last night. I trust you two are well rested? He asked and the two chuckled a bit bashfully at that. We're Ryu-sensei, Momiji said, as she and Naruto regained their composure. Ryu gave a slight nod and straightened himself. Let's go then. He said and motioned the two to follow him and they did as they headed off on their assignment. However, the two suddenly felt a shiver of doom go down their spine. Oh, you felt that right? Naruto said, and Momiji nodded knowing what the shiver meant. Ayane's here in the city, and judging by the aura, she is very furious, the shrine maiden said as they continued to follow Ryu. I just hope she's merciful when we see her, I rather not go through one of her punishments, again. Naruto said, while shaking slightly at the thought. Sometimes Ayane could be a complete sadist, and more vicious than Anko ever could. The three ninja had exited the hotel and began their trek to the rendezvous where one of Todo's contacts was to meet them at. They ninja hopped from the rooftops, heading in the direction of the city docks, more specifically the abandoned warehouse district near them. It took them an hour to get there, and they perched on top of a building overlooking the district. The three looked at the warehouse that was to host the Kumite tournament, and Naruto had to admit, this Godu guy knew a good, out-of-the-way place to hold an illegal death tournament. So, where is our contact? He asked and Ryu used his binocular vision to look for the man they were supposed to meet, and quickly found him by a set of shipping crates. I see him, shipping crates on the right side of the warehouse, said Ryu, and the two looked where he was looking and spotted the man. Naruto looked in said direction and saw said contact, but then he felt something was off. You're not the only one, Kit. Kurama said, I can smell something off about all this. My advice, stay alert, and if it's a setup. The Biju left the rest hanging, but Naruto nodded, and turned to Ryu. Let's keep our guard up. Me and Kurama got a bad vibe from all this, he said, and Ryu and Momiji nodded, knowing that Naruto's gut instincts hadn't failed him yet. Alright, let's go. But stick to the shadows, Ryu said, and the three Hakurin then leapt off the roof and headed into the warehouse district, sticking to the shadows while keeping an eye out for trouble. So far, there was no ambush, but that didn't make the three lower their guard as they arrived at the crates, a few meters from the contact. Ryu then signaled Naruto and Momiji that he'll go first and began heading toward the man who was, strangely, casually leaning against one large crate. The ultimate ninja was within 8 feet before he spoke in a quiet manner. Kirito Sagawa, he said, but received no answer, which caused to narrow his eyes as he looked at the person more closely. He then noticed something, as the man's chest was rising and falling as a normally breathing person would do. His eyes widened slightly in alarm. Shit, he thought before he jumped away as a series of kunai and shuriken flew out and hit the area where he was at. A majority of them hitting the obviously dead spy. Ryu landed safely away from the spot where he was almost turned into a human pincushion as Naruto and Momiji came to his side and formed up back to back, respective weapons drawn. Impressive. You effortlessly dodged the little trap I set up for you, Hakur Shinobi, said a voice that immediately reminded Naruto of Danzo, having heard the Warhawk's voice before, except this one had a slight tinge of arrogance to it. Ryu spoke for the rest, as he gripped the Rukin. Kuzoda Guda, I presume, he said, his calm visage never faltering. They then heard a deep chuckling. Yes, you are correct, the voice, now identified as Guda, said. I was expecting that persistent pest Toto to call for aid from the Hakur village. But my spy never told me that it would be you of all people, Ryu Hayabusa. Ryu's eyes along with his two compatriots, squinted at that piece of info. They now why every man Toto sent to investigated Guda either turned up dead or missing. So you decided to hire ninja yourself. Probably from one of Hakur's rivals. Naruto said as he gripped his own katana, ready to fight anyone willing to come out. Very astute of you, Guda said. Of course, I didn't just hire some random village to deal with you. The sound of snapping fingers was heard, and soon from the rooftops and shadows came several figures in dark green shinobi shozoku in a design that the three knew all too well. Black Spider Clan, Momiji said with an edge to her tone, as the group of Black Spider ninja surrounded them. Most of them were carrying the standard 2 katana, while others were armed with hand talons. Yes, I paid their village in helping me deal with those troublesome spies Toto sent to infiltrate my organization. But now, seeing as you are here, I can offer them your heads, since I read in their bingo book how you and your two friends have been causing quite the headache. Guda said. In proper terms, it's a win-win situation for us both. Naruto growled as the Black Spider ninja prepared to attack. It's not like we haven't faced these guys before, Guda. He said, after becoming stronger, he could take on any grunt that the Black Spider clan had sent. Oh, quite the contrary, Guda assured. I have prepared. It was the three heard the sound of something being dragged on the ground, like metal on concrete. It was then that their unasked questions were answered as a section of the Black Spider ninja moved aside as a tall, possibly 9-foot, menacing-looking figure approached them. The figure appeared to be wearing a butcher's apron, which was bloodied, wore black pants with large steel-heeled boots, the head covered by a hood, and dragged behind it was a massive deadly-looking axe. What the hell? Naruto said in slight shock, as the monstrous thing in front of them effortlessly hefted its large weapon. Allow me to introduce, Seinaku. Guda said. He is a reigning champion from many gladiator fights. Many men have died at his weapon's blade, and just who managed to land a blow on him were only rewarded with a great and painful death at his own hands. The behemoth then gave a roar as he shook his weapon furiously in challenge. Well, this is one of those days. Naruto is the three prepared for a fight. 20 minutes earlier, somewhere else in the city, the streets were busy as market vendors opened their stands for the customers they would be receiving, and it wasn't long as citizens began to move in to purchase what they wanted for the day. Among this crowd of people, one person was also searching, but not for food, or the worthless trinkets sold by peddlers. This person was wearing a light gray cloak as they moved about with grace around the people. The hood of the cloak shadowed the upper part of their face, but the lower part was revealed, showing a feminine mouth. The cloak then appeared next to an old man who's sitting on the ground counting the money he made at his vendor. "Excuse me, sir," the soft, angelic voice said, catching the man's attention as he turned toward the figure and by seeing the person cloaked, began to tense. "What do you want?" he said, apprehensively, just as the person brought out what looked like a small brown leather bag, and tossed it at the man who caught. "They told me you would have information on anyone and anything here in the West. Is that true?" she said, as he opened the bag and his eyes widened at the contents before he closed it. "What information is it that you're looking for?" he asked, and he saw the figure's gloved hand come out from under the cloak, and in the hand was the picture of what looked like a teenager, wearing a black and orange jumpsuit, with blonde spiky hair, blue eyes, 3 whisker-like marks on each side of his face, and sporting a big grin. "I'm looking for this person. It's been 5 years since this picture was taken, but I'm sure his features have changed little since then," she said, as the stand vendor looked at the photo, giving it a thoughtful look. "I can't say that I've seen this person before," he said, and the woman, he was sure this figure was, gave a sigh before he spoke. "But I've heard stories of a person who might match the description. He's a ninja who is commonly known as the Dragon Fox Ninja of Hakure no Sato." The woman seemed to perk up at this. "Do you know where this Hakure no Sato is?" she said, and if the old man could guess, it sounded hopeful. "Hakure is rumored to be in the Mori no Cage, but I recommend not going in there if I were you. Many people go into that place, and very few come out alive. That place is filled with dangerous animals like wolves and tigers, and if they don't get you, the Black Spider clan will." He said warily at said clan's name, which caused the cloaked woman to blink at that. "The what clan?" she said, and the man blinked, before he sighed. "You're one of those ninja from the east, aren't you?" he said, and he felt a glare from the cloaked woman. "So what if I am?" she said, sounding offended. "Don't get your panties in a bunch, little lady. Now just listen to me closely. If you ever come across men wearing dark green shozoku with gray spider web designs on them, don't even think about fighting them. They're very ruthless, and they have no mercy toward anyone outside their clan. Hell, I bet they don't have any toward their own members either," he whispered to her, and the woman's face turned into a frown. "Don't worry about me," she said, and turned to leave. "Unlike the rest of the so-called shinobi in the East, my village's kunoichi have trained hard from a very young age. And if my gut tells me the situation is unfavorable, it's best to retreat than die like a dumb samurai." With that, the woman left, disappearing into the crowd, leaving the old man stumped. What a strange girl, he thought, before he blinked. She said kunoichi, and not shinobi, or her village's ninja all-female. With said person. Random roof. The woman sighed as she removed the hood of her cloak, revealing hime-cut waist-length black hair tied in a high ponytail, with chin-length framing her fair-skinned face. Her eyes were a bright emerald green, and on her forehead was a Hittite, the metal plate decorated with a 5-leaf flower too. The woman looked back at the photo she had, and had a look of longing in her eyes. "Naruto-kun," she thought as she placed the photo over her heart. "I will find you soon, and I will admit my feelings." She had come to the Western lands, against her fellow kunoichi's advice in order to find the former Konoha nin. The reason, because he saved her from herself after the death of her lover. Somewhere down the line, she had developed feelings for the blonde. Before she could think any more, a sudden explosion got her attention. Turning to the harbor in the southwest, she could see plumes of smoke rising in the air where the warehouses are. She then felt a chakra signature she hadn't felt in a long time. It was stronger, but there was no doubt in her mind. Could it be? She thought, before discarding her cloak, revealing a skin-tight gray kunoichi uniform with a shoulder guard on her right shoulder. She was also wearing 2 gloves, with one going up her left arm to her bicep, and a glove which had a leather cord wrapped around it. An opening in her shirt showed some of her sizable cleavage. The kunoichi then proceeded to jump from the building to another rooftop, heading toward the harbor. "I'm coming, Naruto." 15 minutes earlier. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Ayane was grumbling angrily as she stomped through the halls of the hotel that Ryu, Naruto, and Momiji were staying. Many of the other guests quickly got out of the furious kunoichi's way, lest they faced her wrath as well. "When I get my hands on those 2, I'm gonna kill 'em," she screamed in her mind as she finally approached the room that the receptionist told they were at, after a good threat of a slow castration by Ayane with a dull kunai, and then proceeded to kick the door off its hinges. When she stormed in, her eyes narrowed, as she saw they were not here, but knew they were, as she could still smell the after effects of. "Damn it," she growled out as her fists tightened, cracking while turning pale. "Where the hell are they?" Imouto," a voice said, and she turned around and saw her half-siblings by the door. "I know you are furious at Naruto and Momiji not taking you along, but as your brother, I strongly suggest." Hayate didn't get to finish as the killing intent from Ayane was soaring through the roof. Said sister had an light purple aura of doom around, as he swore he could see the girl's eyes glowing. "Nei-chan," Kasumi said in order to calm her sister down. "Please don't angry at Naruto ni, or Momiji-chan. They were just in a hurry because Jo-sama told them that it was urgent. They didn't mean to forget about you." Ayane seemed to calm somewhat, but gave an angry HMPH before moving out of the room. Her 2 siblings wisely moving out of the way. Hayate gave a sigh as he watched his sister walking down the hall. "May Kami have mercy on Naruto and Momiji's souls, cause Ayane would surely not," he said, while Kasumi nodded as the 2 followed her out of the hotel. After promising the manager they'll pay damages to the hotel room door, the 3 Mugen Tenshin clan members were now on one of the many roofs of the major city of the West. "So, where do you think we should start looking for Ryu Dono and the others, Onisama?" Kasumi asked her older brother, who looked over the city. "Well, from what we got from the general's secretary told us, they're investigating one of Kuni Shinai's councilmen for suspected corruption," Hayate said. "Where they currently are, they don't know." Ayane was tapping her foot aggressively, wanting nothing more than to beat her baka of a boyfriend, and her fellow girlfriend to Kingdom Come. "So how do we find them?" she said, while Hayate placed his hand under his chin. "I think given that a mission like this could go sour, and the best thing to do is," he stopped as he heard 2 distant booms, which his 2 sisters also heard, and they looked toward the harbor, and saw plumes of smoke in that area. Follow the explosions. Not saying another word, the 3 began to roof hop toward the distant battle. 5 minutes earlier. Main gate of Kuni Shinai. The so-called Naruto retrieval team have finally arrived at the gate of Kuni Shinai. They were, with the exception of Sasuke, impressed by the massive wall that protects the city from invaders, bandits, and rogue ninja. They could also spot many heavily armed and armored samurai guarding the walls, with archers watching them like a hawk. "Man, these guys are serious," Kiba said, as the group proceeded to walk through the gate. "I can tell they're wary just by the smell." Shikamaru nodded at that. Not to mention samurai and ninja are supposed to be sworn rivals with each other. "These guys are just like the samurai back in the Land of Iron, but I can tell they're only letting us in as long as we behave ourselves," he said as he gave Sasuke a sideways glance, who just gave a agitated, HN. As they entered, Jiraiya turned around and spoke to them. Alright, now that we're here, we are gonna have to split up. That way we'll cover more ground. The Sennin then turned to the two Hyuga with them. You can each search the city alone if you want to, he said, and before Neji could object, Hinata cut him off. That's fine with me, Jiraiya-sama, the Hyuga heiress said as she gave her cousin a glare. Jiraiya could only sigh at this. After Naruto was banished, and months later his heritage revealed, Hinata refused to be associated with anyone that hurt his godson, that included her own clan, more specifically, her father, younger sister, and cousin. She told them they were stuck in their old customs, and were arrogant not to see whole picture, and gave Neji a real tongue lashing about him being a blind hypocrite, since he and the rest of the branch family also had a seal, and have suffered for it. Now they were the ones who were becoming the oppressors, and said she was a fool for wanting to help a cousin and the others in the branch family who had become like the main family. Needless to say, Hinata had disowned her entire family for their empty prejudice of Naruto. Okay, let's go, Jiraiya said. We'll meet at the hotel with what we gathered. But if you see any sign of Naruto, radio in when you do. The others nodded, as Hinata had different thoughts about that. When I spot him, I will do the exact opposite, she thought, and soon the group dispersed and began their search for the wayward Uzumaki. Not knowing the predicament he was in,